Welcome to the podcast. I'm Andrew Mackley, your host for Strategic Insights. Today, we're doing a quality systems focus. I'm lucky enough to be joined today by this gentleman, Dave Rendel, our senior solutions architect, specifically in quality. I've had the pleasure of knowing Dave quite a while. We're not going to date ourselves, but we started off working together on automotive accounts, and I thought it would be critical for as we see the need for quality systems evolving. By industry, every industry for that example. It'd be good for us to have a segment here where people can listen in to hear what's driving factors in those industry verticals, what's changing in quality solutions, and how that's being applied. So when someone's like, man, am I at a point where I might need a system, or these risks are getting outstanding, am I on an island by myself? Maybe some of the things that we highlight today and Dave talks about will resonate and give you somebody to reach out and talk to in greater detail on how we're helping people solve those needs. Welcome today, Dave.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Andrew.
So, Dave, before we get into it, I want to give a little background. I always said I knew you for a while, but why don't you give everybody a little history and background on how long you've been in the quality space and what your role is at Strategic?
Yeah, sure. So I've been a consultant in quality for about 11 years now. Living right outside Detroit, it has been an obvious transition to doing automotive. So I spent a lot of time working on automotive accounts. And from there, I kind of spread out to do a little bit of industrial, some life sciences, defense and aerospace, flexible packaging, all that sort of stuff. And it's been really interesting to see how different those different worlds are. Whether you're regulated by your customers, you're regulated by government, it makes a big difference, but a lot of the processes seem to be very similar. But also you can kind of see how the best practices in different industries can come together, and how you can take something really good from industrial and take it to automotive, or something really good from life sciences and take it to aerospace. What's interesting is you don't see a lot of crossover in those industries. So, people that work in aerospace, they tend to stay in aerospace. People that work in quality and automotive, they tend to stick around automotive. So, seeing those differences has been really, really fun to kind of bring them to the table for the other companies. Going from a life sciences company and taking their best practices to automotive has been a lot of fun. So seeing the differences there, it's been pretty cool.
So that wealth of experience between industry verticals and seeing what has worked well for, like you said, for life science, it can translate back into other industries. I'm glad that you can talk about that today, because I think it is a missing piece, because we're starting to see items that were built out in quality systems for those now being mandated in other industries. So let's start off a little bit differently. I know we have a bunch of industry verticals, and I wanted to get into asking you, what are you seeing historically? What are the new drivers in those industries? But let's go with customer driven. So when I think customer driven, I think automotive immediately. Yeah. So automotive industry, what have you seen and what's changing?
Yeah. So the things that we've seen over the years, in my last 11 years, I've seen a really big push from preventative to risk-based thinking. And so all these different automotive companies are really trying to figure out how do we apply that to our industry? How do we have our customers, force our customers to do that, make sure they do that, I should say, maybe not force is the right word, but make sure our customers are actually doing that. And you're seeing these supplier quality manuals become bigger, uglier, and have really in-depth requirements. And some of those requirements can be as simple as a one sentence in Ford's SQA, where it actually says that you have to have a software system to manage foundational FMEAs. And that one requirement is going to be a massive change for all of Ford's suppliers, because you can't do your FMEAs and your control plans on Excel anymore. Right? You have to do them in a software system, and you have to do them in a way where you can really inherit the different failure modes and controls from other products or other improvements that you've done based on those foundational processes. So we've really seen a lot of customers people in the quality industry coming in and saying, hey, I got to figure out how to do this. What software applications do this? And it's actually not very many. So there's very few in the industry that are helping to manage against those with that kind of forward-thinking foundational FMEA that can inherit through to the library FMEAs or the SKU level FMEAs. And the big one that we've seen is Q80 EQMS can really handle that. So we're seeing a lot of people coming in, looking at Q80 EQMS and figuring out how they can move forward with that. And it's a big, ugly problem, right? You've got all these Excel documents with everything created in usually different ways, or even if you've copied from the same library, you're having problems where you've made changes to those, but those changes haven't necessarily reflected back to the library. So getting those in order is a big problem. So, we've been working on, from a consulting perspective, how do we do that? How do we help customers do that? And we found some really good ways to make sure that we can get all that stuff, all that good information, all that continuous improvement you've had over the years, and apply it more broadly across processes, across products, and even across different product lines. We're also seeing things like Toyota and their delivery requirements. That was a big change back in, I want to say 2017, where they had to put RFIDs on the loading docks and in the products to make sure that they know exactly what got shipped and where it gets shipped. Because, as we try and get leaner, as we try and save money, things like missed deliveries or delivering the wrong thing or delivering late, those become bigger problems, and those stop our ability to be leaner, to have lower costs, and eventually deliver those lower prices to the customer in that way.
Absolutely. And with just in time and how tight people run, if you have a big quality issue, you're probably going to have a very hard time not catching up without incurring a whole bunch of costs with expedited shipping and just the problem tracking that's surrounding it.
Exactly, because everyone's running so lean. You got to figure out, how do I squeeze more parts out to be able to make up for what I was just late on, right? Yeah. Or what I just delivered bad parts for. And then you got to spend all the time to figure out what happened and how you fix that, right? I mean, it just creates such big problems. So if you can manage your risk, you can really reduce that across the board. And having risk management automated in your system, ensuring that things get done that need to be done, and that all those things are followed through on the right timeline, that's really difficult to do when it's just people processes, right? When it's just paper and people trying to manage it. So having a software system that's going to make sure that if somebody performs a task, the next task is scheduled and then must be performed by the next person, and they're notified and they go in and do it. It just makes it so much easier. It removes all those issues where you have to have a meeting about every single problem to make sure you get it from point A to point B.
Absolutely. And you noted something that I think people don't realize, that finding a quality system that does this, there are very few, right? So we just discussed how there's few of them. They have to be flexible and responsive to industry needs. And automotive is a very one of those that when they have a requirement come out, that requirement starts off as a suggestion, becomes more than a suggestion, and then becomes a requirement to bid when they start asking you what systems you run. So when you start, it's a competitive advantage. If you're already ahead of the game, like you said, not managing these things on Word, your ability to bid on new business with possibly new customers, you go from a lot of tier one generally are servicing one or maybe two customers. Now we're seeing more and more people do more and more customers. That's a larger list of requirements that their quality system is going to have to adhere to effectively.
Exactly. You see a lot of companies that, for instance, will only supply to Honda because they have all the Honda regulations in place, right? They know what they're doing with Honda. They got a good relationship with them. But, it's just making parts for a Honda Accord and a Honda Civic. That doesn't make you a ton of money. It doesn't allow you a whole lot of growth if those products aren't growing. One of the things that I do when I help customers implement the software and utilize software is we think about, I don't just want you to think about what's going to help you in your everyday life and what's going to help you in your audit, but this is a sales tool. Like a quality management system, if you have a customer come in or a potential customer come in and they see your quality management system and it is easy for you to fly around everywhere and they ask, how do you do X, Y, Z? And you can pull it up and you can show them different metrics. I say, think about that when we're implementing it, because there are different things you might want to show and we can make that easier, because these quality management systems have become so flexible nowadays that you can kind of do what you want to do within them. You can create your own fields to be able to gather metrics based on that information and stuff like that. It's been pretty cool, and it's been great to see that transition from, very rigid, we're just going to follow ISO 9001 and IATF 16949 to what best practices can we use from any industry,
right.
And how can we use that to further our goals in our continuous improvement, as well as improve our revenue stream by pulling in more customers.
Absolutely. And I think highlighting how EQMS can do that, as well as I always laugh, what's the scariest point of your year? And they're like, either my customer audit or my overall audit. And you know what the easiest way to handle your customer audit and your overall audit when it comes to quality is to have it at your fingertips, or have the pre-configured, like you said, when you implement it, to have those documents ready to show them, so they're not spending extra time, looking at, it's not like anything's going wrong, but we always know that the longer they're there, the less it's likely they're not going to find a problem. They're going to find a problem, if they're there longer.
It's true.
And it's not to say they're going to find it, but like anything, the ease that you make their life is a selling point for you as an organization, is the highlight to that. So, as you look at that, are we seeing a lot of people starting to bid on more work outside of their normal OEM? I mean, is that now the new thing with trying to diversify for your customer base?
I'm seeing that in the tier ones. Absolutely. I mean, the tier 2s and 3s, they're always looking for new business. But the tier 1s, they're not just bidding on the next Ford product, the next Honda product. They're bidding on, I want another company's business. I want to diversify. I want to expand, and I want to be able to open new plants. I mean, it's just I don't have to tell you, and I don't have to tell our customers, there's a manufacturing boom in the U.S. right now. Plants are being built everywhere. We're onshoring, we're nearshoring, we're friendshoring. And if you have an automotive company, and you are building cars in the U.S., it's up for grabs. Your business is up for grabs right now, and people are seeing that, and they want to get ahead of it. So you are seeing companies who traditionally, they have their whole ethos, their whole personality, their whole identity built for one OEM, saying, no, we're gonna expand out. We need other customers. We need to work with other people. And there's a lot of growing pains there, but those growing pains will be very profitable in the future.
Absolutely. And I think that nearshoring and all the things that are changing manufacturing in the United States due to the supply chain issues that we've had over the last few years, it's a new world moving forward. And I'm glad that you could highlight that with the EQMS and automotive. Switching verticals. What are we looking at in the industrial and flexible packaging area?
Well, so industrial and flexible packaging has usually been behind the curve when you compare it to automotive, life sciences, microelectronics, and aerospace. And because they just don't have as many standard requirements from their customers, right? So most people are just like, we're going to be ISO 9001. Well, ISO 9001 changed back in 2016 to really kind of implement a bit more risk-based thinking, but not a ton, right? It was enough to get it moving, but we're seeing people go way above and beyond that. We're seeing industrial companies go ISO 31000 so that they're fully managing their risk across their organization. We're seeing them implement risk-based thinking within their corrective actions. They're thinking about, not only is this going to fix the problem I have, but what's the risk that we could have issues based on this? What's the risk that we could have another problem based on what we're doing? I had an industrial company. They delivered a part, a box of parts, and they make fasteners, right? And they delivered this box of fasteners to their customer, and it turns out it wasn't heat treated. So there was a labeling issue. Where it was labeled as a part that was heat treated. It was not heat treated. So it fit, it was the right part, but they find out later it wasn't heat treated. They report it to the customer. The customer says recall, right? This recall cost this company $350,000 because of everything that needed to happen. There were products already out in the field. They had to pull them back. And can you imagine how many fasteners you have to sell to make up $350,000 of a...
I couldn't imagine.
Yeah.
Because the margin on, when you talk to fasteners and things like that, you're talking a very low margin per unit. That's a lot of units you're going to have to make up.
Yeah. You're charging, pennies or less than a penny per unit. And your margin on those is next to nothing. So you can imagine what you have to do to get out from that. So we actually talked about it, and I said, every now and then, every 10 years, you're probably going to have a big problem like this. Maybe it's less, maybe it's more than 10 years, who knows? And so they started to think about, okay, well, how do we build risk and quality into financials? And they ended up starting a little piggy bank account basically to say, hey, we're going to start setting some money aside each year so that this doesn't hit us whenever this happens, which could happen in the future. We're going to start making sure that this doesn't hit us that hard. So on top of all the other things they did to make sure it doesn't happen again, they implemented a new system for labeling, and so on and so forth. They took on and think, okay, what's the financial risk in the future and how do I mitigate that? Well, get a little piggy bank going and, figure out how to make that work for you.
Absolutely. I mean, when everybody looks at high volume items such as, let's just say, fasteners, you start to sit there and think, okay, I got to just sell more. Well, that's great, but when you sell more, there's also more risk. Right. When more risk hits, and if you're not accurately portraying what your operating margin is, that's a real issue. And I've noticed that, and you can maybe highlight to this, the more people that have access to real information with BI tools and with real costs, and they're getting it down to like the micro level, where we're taking labor, we're talking machine, we're talking like not just lumping the average, getting an idea every year. And now that we're seeing people getting access to real data, whether it be EDI, these things where you're getting these tool sets, it's just making it to the point where if I'm going to be competitive, I've got to really have a grasp for, like you noted, my risk is going to come hit me at, because I might be fine for the next 3 years. And I'm noticing risk basically in every vertical, and it's never been that way, right? Risk is usually, some people are like, oh, that's just a sunk cost.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And now there's no more, I don't hear sunk cost a whole lot anymore, at least not in the last 3 years.
No, definitely not. And risk has traditionally been, life science does that all the time, right? Pharma and medical device and stuff like that. But it's gone everywhere. Everybody's thinking about what can I do to decrease the risk of X, Y, and Z in the future. And, you mentioned data, and there's just so much data in these systems. And the really important thing is, how do we turn that data into information? And are we getting the right information? Because data isn't going to help you make a decision. Information helps you make a decision. So it doesn't matter how many bad parts I had. I need to know my PPM. Are we, and then I got to apply risk to that. So I can use that information. I can use that risk analysis I've done to make better decisions. So you turn that data into information, you apply risk-based thinking to it, and you can make better decisions. And we're seeing a lot of companies doing that, and a lot of companies not doing that, and they're going away. Yeah. You see a lot of companies right now, it's succeed or don't. And some aren't.
We've seen some acquisitions happen where they're acquiring companies that don't have these systems, and it's kind of telling. It's very rare you acquire somebody and they're like, oh, we're replacing a system. We're generally replacing Word, right? Or we're replacing some paper documentation system. I think the interesting part to me when you look at that risk and you look at that is, you said information. How fast can you act on that information? So you talk about those parts that went out to the customer. The faster you get to that customer, maybe that instead of being a $300,000 mistake, it's a $100,000 mistake.
Or significantly less if they don't get into the customer's products. If you can figure out that you're one box short of non-heat treated fasteners prior to the customer starting to put them in their products, you have just turned it into a poor delivery. You have changed a $350,000 issue to a missed delivery.
Yep.
That's not near as bad. That's not near as bad.
No, I imagine the CFO and controller are a lot happier when you call up and say, we just had a bad delivery.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, don't put those parts in. We're good.
So, industrial and aerospace, industrial and flex packaging, looking at risk and adapting that. Is there anything else that you're seeing in that space, or is that the big one right now for?
I think that's the big one right now. A lot of people are switching to either automotive, life sciences, or aerospace style quality management systems now. Almost every industrial company that I talk to has the idea that they want their quality to be better than their competitors. Okay. And so they're looking at more strict standards. Like, they're not going to implement IATF 16949, but they might want to take some of the areas from it and implement it into their quality system as well. So just an expansion of the type of quality they're doing and of the quality departments, as well as, another big one has been taking the purchasing department and merging it with the supplier quality department. And that way the purchasing department is making better decisions, not just based on price, but also based on the historic performance of that supplier. So normally those two departments are a bit at odds, right? I don't want you to buy
that.
from them, but purchasing says, well, they're the cheapest ones. Well, there's a reason, right?
Yeah.
So having that information, again, that just goes back to you have the information, you apply risk to it, and then you make the decision. But if you don't have that information on their quality and how they've done in the past, then you're not making maybe the most optimal decision in purchasing.
Yeah, you're making a decision half of the information that's out there. Right. Absolutely.
Yep.
So you noted two other areas. What's going on in defense and aerospace that people are taking bits and pieces out of and trying to apply that to their vertical?
Well, I would say, a lot of the things that they're trying to do is they want to make use of these quality systems. But the problem with defense is so many of them are deployed in the cloud only nowadays. Now, you can find some that they'll still deploy on premise. You can still get it installed at your organization without being in the cloud. But the problem with the cloud is where is the support for most of these large company clouds? Oh, they're not within our borders, right?
Yeah,
no. So it's very difficult to ensure that you're getting an ITAR compliant quality management system. So we're seeing ETQ, for example, which is another quality system. They are deploying in AWS Gov. So Amazon Web Services has a kind of ITAR compliant government system, and ETQ has started being able to deploy there so that they can work with those defense and aerospace companies. They can take those lessons that ETQ has learned from automotive, life sciences, et cetera, apply them to aerospace, as well as aerospace and defense, of course, apply that to them and allow them to utilize that. So the jump from them is, how do we make use of all these systems that we normally don't have access to because they're not ITAR compliant? Well, you got a couple of players there, and ETQ is kind of the big one that said it's not only going to be in our software to be ITAR compliant, but it's also going to be in our cloud, and it's going to be single tenant, right? You see all these, this move, and this is a little bit of software industry jargon, so I apologize for some of those who maybe not in the software industry, but single tenant is the idea that you have your own servers. Multi-tenant is you share servers with other companies. You might not be able to see their data, but it's nowhere near as secure as a single tenant system. I'm sure somebody's going to say, no, it can be, maybe it can, but it's generally not seen as secure, and it's generally not seen as ITAR compliant unless you can really show that you're putting those restrictions in place. You only have the right people working on it, and that data is really that secure.
That's a game changer. I mean, you're telling me this, and I know I just heard it briefly prior to the meeting, but I struggled with some companies that are looking at going down the ITAR route because it's coming due to acquisition or what they're trying to actually produce, and now having a quality option that's not on premise, because that's what we were looking for, right? We're looking for on premise solutions, and that's going to be it's going to be interesting the next 18 months how many people start leaning that direction, especially larger companies that are that need to segment that possibly globally. Yeah,
it is. And it makes a big difference when, you got all these acquisitions of maybe like this one site in Wisconsin that supplies to defense. And now you got to think, well, what do? Do we just keep that site in Wisconsin separate? Do we just make it so they have their own quality system that doesn't communicate with the rest of the company's quality system? And now you're segregating data, which prevents you from getting information, right? It prevents you from combining that data and understanding the full value of it, right? And so being able to do something like utilize ETQ, have the same quality system, have it be ITAR compliant, but also not so onerous or not such a big pain that your automotive, your industrial sites can use it as well. It just makes a big difference.
It's interesting to me because we've got a number of customers that are looking at ITAR specifically for ERP as well as quality. And as we look at how that changes in some of the, like you said, access to that information, not that data to make decisions, if you're segmenting that, the auditing is twice as much work. The communication is longer. We all know that speed to market nowadays, especially with, like we're talking about, everybody that's onshoring and the ability to go after work, your speed to be able to go after and bid on business and accurately defend why you can reach these government requirements, or it's going to be your ability to be first in and longevity in that marketplace. So it's going to be a speed race. You're going to be a busy man.
Not much will change then.
Okay. Fair. I am sorry about that. Looking at the other one that's really big for us at Strategic, because we do a phenomenal amount of work in this space, specifically on the West Coast and East Coast, and now even becoming more prevalent in the Midwest. What's it looking like for our people in the life science space?
Yeah. So for life sciences, they have the unfortunate requirement of having to deal with the government, right? And not in a way that defense and aerospace does, in the way that they're fully regulated by the government. They have all these requirements they have to meet. So, over the years, there have been many players that have come in that are just life sciences only, and they say, okay, we're just going to apply this to life sciences. Well, that's great. And that's really helpful. But the thing that I see there is, I think about when I go to a company and you've got people that have only worked at that company. They might have 25 years of quality experience. But if I go out and I talk to 10 other companies, I'm going to get different ways that they do things, different solutions that they've made. And if they could all come together with that one guy that has that 25 years experience, he would learn so much because of the way these other companies are doing it. So you can really get segregated into how your company does things, and just trying to think of solutions based on that, right? Well, I think it's the same way with quality management systems. You have all these quality management systems that only do life sciences, but you've also got other quality management systems that are kind of a bit more generalist, that do a bit more. They learn things from other industries and they apply them in. QAD QMS is one of them, but another one is the one I just mentioned for defense and aerospace, ETQ. They've done a really good job of applying a lot of life sciences, or getting the life science requirements that are needed, making sure they can be compliant to life sciences, but then also bringing in the best practices from other industries. You see in a lot of ways that there are a lot of compliance actions in life science, but you don't see as much. I feel like I don't see as much continuous improvement, because it's so hard to make sure that we're complying with all those things that the government wants us to do, while also figuring out how we can make our products better, how we can make them faster, how we can make them higher quality, how we can use better materials and things like that, when everything has to change, when any change takes forever to make, because it has to be validated, right? Exactly. So having a company like ETQ who has validation that's easy to do, you have strategic information group, us of course, that can help them with that validation. We can speed it along, we can make it go more quickly, we can make it less of a pain. That makes a really big difference. And we're even, SIG is even building IP specifically for life sciences companies within ETQ. So I talked earlier about these quality management systems becoming more flexible. Well, that's one of the things we're seeing. You can, in companies like ETQ, will allow you to build your own applications inside of it. So if you contract with SIG, then you get the benefit of the stuff that we're building to add on to ETQ, to ensure that it's not only doing the things it needs to do, but we're taking that data, that information that we found in other areas and life sciences companies we've worked with. I don't even know what the number is of life sciences companies we've worked with over the years, but it is astronomical, right?
Yeah, we've done over 1,200 customers. We're managing between 300 and 400 active. It's the number's high.
It's a lot. So we take all that experience and we're thinking, hey, you know what would be really helpful in a quality system, and we build it in. And that's one of the really cool things that we're able to do, and that we're seeing in life sciences is people want it. People want that information. How are people doing this elsewhere? How do you survive on 2% margin in automotive and still have a good quality product, right? How do you do that? And they want to do that too, right? They don't want the 2% margin, but they want to have a good quality product without spending as much money, right?
The 2% margin. And it's interesting because you talked about it being a little bit, let's say singularly focused when you're a quality only system for life science. And when you get in this flexibility, and we're of course building out IP to support it, you're taking that flexible system that's built to also support life science. And you told me already earlier, they're on the Gov cloud. So you're already got the ability to get really, requirement-wise, you can do a lot of interesting things there. But then you're taking our knowledge set, which automotive, life science, food and beverage, and we can take the best of those pieces that we've seen to be adapted, and we can offer a new tool set inside of ETQ effectively to customers, and as well as develop new tool sets and be flexible and responsive. So as a competitive advantage for those customers as they move forward. That'll be I'm excited to see where those things go, because I know we've got a number of people on your team that are helping make that move and adapt to what we see is coming forward.
Absolutely. And there's a big historical precedence to this. So in the 40s, the aerospace industry was trying to figure out how do we manage all these products and processes. And so they came up with a failure mode and effects analysis. And that kind of went by the wayside in aerospace for a while, but automotive picked it up and they made it what it is today, which is it's a bear. It's a big it's a big, hairy, audacious goal to get a FEMA done and make it a living FEMA, right? But it works really well now. And aerospace has picked it back up, and you're seeing a lot more aerospace companies require FEMAs. You're seeing a lot of tier ones in aerospace say, hey, I need some help figuring out how we're going to implement this and how we're going to do it. And this might be a couple of years outdated because I started seeing this in 2017, 2016. But it's been really interesting to help them with that and help them get all of the lessons learned from automotive for the last 40 years of using the failure mode effects analysis. So we've seen these things move from industry to industry before, and we want to help that. We want to help move that along, make sure people are getting what they need and they're using the best tool they can.
You know, I think for the last almost 30 minutes, we've covered some really good topics, and we talk about and we have breakout sessions for quality and the advancement of quality systems at most of the user groups for QAD, so Midwest, Southeast, West Coast, as well as you're at them as well. As people reach out and they listen to this and they want to know more about quality, what's the guiding principle you'd say? Hey, reach out to us if you have any questions. Look at our website. What are some areas you'd point people to for an idea to learn more and then start that dialogue?
Well, I'd start with the podcast, right? Let's definitely listen to the podcast and see what's going on. No, absolutely. Look at our website. Check out other resources you might want to look into is, other industry groups, right? I mean, if you're in automotive, you can look into the life science industry groups and see what they're doing. You can see what they're saying. But you want to, catch us at the AIAG Quality Conference, for example. Catch us at, you just had the QAD Southwest and Southeast and Midwest and West Coast user groups.
We have customer engagement days, and if you thought, well, it might not fit for me, we're happy to let you meet and speak with other customers that are in a different vertical that are using a quality system and let you have a face-to-face with real live people that are going through it. So, reach out to us on LinkedIn for that matter as well. But we're excited because this is a space I think is going to get a ton of traction in the next 18 months and continue, just due to the fact of the world is shrinking, but due to supply chain, everybody needs to be more responsive, and the flexibility and capabilities that are going to be offered here are going to be interesting. So, I owe you coffee because you used bear in the conversation, which we laughed about was a part of a conversation earlier in a podcast. You've touched on all the good highlighted points regarding quality. Before we end, if you have to add anything when someone needs to look at a quality system, or if they're debating on if they need to look at a quality system, what's some words of advice that you could give somebody? Because we've all talked to people that are not ready yet, or were ready 2 years ago and should have. What's that timeline if they think they should probably reach out and get a little more information? What's that litmus test look like in your world as you've worked with all these customers and all these verticals around the world? When should you start that?
So here's the thing. The only constant in manufacturing is change, right? And I would say that any company should be reaching out. Unless you already have a full-fledged quality system with a single system that's integrated to the rest of your organization with your demand and supply chain planning and your purchasing and your manufacturing, and it's all integrated together, you could improve. And it's hard for me to think of a customer that couldn't, I don't want to say this. It's hard for me to think of a customer that wouldn't be able to benefit from improving their systems in one way or another. But if you have audit findings, especially, let's start from the bottom here. If you have audit findings, especially, you're going to want to reach out because we can help you fix those findings, right? We have software that can help you fix those, and we can do it right.
Absolutely.
If you have issues with your customers, if you're trying to expand your customer base and you're worried about the new regulations, well, we can help you with that. We have the knowledge, we have the consultants that have been in industry, that have seen it, and they've been working with companies across industries for decades, some of them. So I would say that the biggest two, except for aside from everybody, the biggest two are if you've got audit findings, if you're looking for new customers, or if you just want to make some improvements to help improve that bottom line, quality is a good place to look. It's a cost center, and we can reduce those costs significantly.
Awesome. I think that's a great close for customers that are looking at that need. From my side of the house, who talks to people all the time that are possibly, let's say, pre-quality system or in the planning stages. If you're thinking of quality, you should probably be planning for your quality. You're already at that stage. Whether you might even already need a system, but at the end of the day, just remember, quality systems are one of those business systems that allow you to actually have an ROI attached to it, as well as a risk avoidance. And as we move forward, we both know from the $300,000 heat treated part goes, you can't understate risk, especially in today's market. It's when it can gain or lose you an account. But Dave, thank you for your time today. I appreciate you coming into the podcast studio. It's always fun to talk. I know that you and I will probably have a couple more sessions with clients at some user groups coming up, but I look forward to having this conversation again in the near future when you define some of those product sets inside ETQ that we're offering for some of our life science accounts.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
All right. Have a great day.
You too.